My name is Ruby. I'm sitting in my dorm room at the university, looking at the bracelet on my wrist. It's a simple silver chain with a tiny locket, and it's the only thing I have left of my mother. The memories flood back, and I'm transported to that fateful day in the lawyer's office. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was sitting across from my father and stepmother, Patricia. The tension in the room was palpable as Ms. Harrison, my mother's attorney, began to speak. She read from the trust document, explaining that my mother had established an irrevocable trust 18 months before her death. The trust named Ms. Harrison as the sole trustee, and I was the sole beneficiary. The trust held $400,000, a combination of my mother's life insurance, savings, and the proceeds from the sale of our house. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "But he's her father," she said, gesturing towards my father, Thomas. "He has parental rights." Ms. Harrison looked at her with a cold, steady gaze. "Parental rights do not extend to an irrevocable trust established by a third party. Mr. Thompson is not the grantor, not the trustee, and not a beneficiary. He has no legal standing here."
None.
Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and anger. "Your mother never told me about this," he said. Ms. Harrison shrugged. She wasn't required to. Patricia's face turned red with anger. She grabbed the manila folder she had brought with her and slammed it on the table. "Then we'll get a lawyer. We'll contest this." Ms. Harrison smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "You're welcome to retain counsel, but I should mention something first." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This office received a letter from the bank dated 3 weeks ago. It documents an unauthorized attempt to access Ruby's trust account. The caller identified herself as Patricia Thompson, legal guardian of Ruby Thompson." Patricia's face drained of color. She stared at Ms. Harrison, her mouth open in shock. "You called the bank?" Thomas said, his voice filled with disbelief. Patricia didn't answer. She sat there, her hands trembling, as Ms. Harrison continued. "Impersonating a legal guardian to access a minor's protected trust is a serious matter, potentially a federal one. I trust this won't happen again." Patricia's hand moved to her throat. She touched her earring, a nervous gesture I had seen her make a dozen times before. But this time it was different. There was a look of fear in her eyes, a realization that she had crossed a line. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his face pale. He rubbed his hands over his eyes, as if trying to erase the last few minutes from his memory. "The petition for guardianship, the conversations with my brother, the Sunday dinner campaign. All of it was useless," he said. Ms. Harrison nodded. "Your wife's actions were anticipated by your late wife. She planned for every eventuality." She reached into the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Your mother left a letter," she said, looking at me. "It's addressed to your father. She asked me to read it aloud in your presence at the appropriate time." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I had known about the letter for weeks, but I had no idea what was inside. Thomas pushed back from the table. "I don't need to hear this," he said. "Mom asked for this," I said, my voice steady.
Please.
Thomas looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long time. Then he settled back into his chair and folded his hands. Ms. Harrison opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. She began to read, her voice soft but firm. "Thomas, if you're hearing this, then what I expected has happened. I'm gone, and someone in your life is trying to take what I left for our daughter. I want you to know that I don't hate you. I don't write this with anger. I write it with clarity.
I know you, Thomas.
I've always known you. You're not a bad man. You're a weak one, and weakness left unchecked does the same damage as cruelty. I know you'll remarry. I know whoever you choose will look at what I built and see an opportunity, and I know you'll convince yourself that sharing is the right thing because it's easier than fighting for your daughter. It was always easier for you to agree than to stand. I used to think that was kindness. Now I know it's just another word for cowardice. But I'm not writing this to punish you. I'm writing this because our daughter shouldn't have to fight alone." She's strong, Thomas, stronger than you know, stronger than me maybe, but she's also 17 and she just lost her mother, and she deserves at least one parent who puts her first. I couldn't make you into the father she deserved, but I could make sure she'd be okay without one. That's what this trust is. It's not about the money. It's about making sure our daughter has a floor that no one, not you, not whoever comes after me, can pull out from under her. Don't be angry at Ruby. Be angry at yourself for making this letter necessary. As MS. Harrison finished reading, there was a long silence in the room. Thomas sat there, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I could hear him crying, a soft, broken sound that I had never heard before. Patricia stood up, her face contorted with anger. "This is ridiculous," she said. She grabbed her folder and stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind her. I sat there, stunned, as a mess. Harrison put the letter away. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," she said. "She knew exactly what she was doing." I looked at her, my eyes filled with tears.
Thank you, I said.
"Emma." Harrison smiled. "You're welcome, Ruby. Your mother did everything she could to protect you. Now it's up to you to make the most of what she's given you." I nodded, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. I looked at my father, who was still sitting there, his face buried in his hands. I wanted to say something, to comfort him, but I didn't know what to say. I stood up and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad," I said. "I'm not going to fight you. But I'm not giving you Mom's money. It's not mine to give. She put it in trust for a reason. She knew you'd ask, and she made it so the answer would always be no, even if I was too scared to say it myself." Thomas looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry, Ruby," he said. "I should have been a better father." I nodded. "I know, Dad. But it's not too late. You can still be there for me." Thomas nodded. "I will," he said. "I promise." I leaned down and kissed him on the forehead.
I love you, Dad, I said.
"I love you too, Ruby," he said. I walked out of the room, my head held high. I knew that the battle was over, but I also knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But I was ready. I had my mother's trust, my mother's bracelet, and my mother's strength. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Looking back, I realized that it all started 6 months ago, when my mother died. She was a teacher, a 4th-grade teacher at the local elementary school. She was the kind of teacher who stayed late cutting construction paper, who bought winter coats for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. She taught me to read before kindergarten, and she taught me to write thank you cards by hand. She taught me that silence sometimes is the loudest thing you can say. She was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, lung cancer, stage 3. She never smoked a day in her life, but the doctor said it happens. She said, "Then we deal with it." And she did. For 23 months, she fought the cancer with everything she had. She had chemo on Thursdays, taught on Mondays through Wednesdays, and graded papers on her hospital bed with an 4 drip in her left arm and a red pen in her right. I sat beside her every day, doing my homework, pretending I couldn't hear the machines beeping. The last week, she could barely talk, but she pulled me close, her hands so thin I could feel every bone, and whispered something I didn't fully understand. "Everything you need is with Harrison. Promise me you'll call her." I didn't know who Harrison was. I didn't know what everything meant. I just held her hand and said, "I promise, Mom." She smiled, a small, tired smile. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with the sun pouring through the window like it had no respect for what was happening in that room, she let go. I was the only one there. My father hadn't visited once in 2 years. Not when she was diagnosed, not when she lost her hair, not when she sold our house to pay the deductibles. Not once. The nurses cried more than I did. Mrs. Jenkins from across the street brought flowers to a room that no longer needed them. My Aunt Sarah drove 3 hours from the city and held me in the hospital hallway while I shook. My father sent a text the next day. "Sorry for your loss." Like I was a coworker. Like she was someone he'd met at a party once. That part mattered. You'll see why. The funeral was small. Mom's friends from school, a few neighbors, my Aunt Sarah, and me. My father showed up 20 minutes late, wearing a suit I'd never seen. He brought Patricia, his wife of 5 years. The woman he married 12 months after walking out on my mother and me. She wore a black dress and an expression that said she'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't sign the guest book. I was 17, and I had nowhere to go. In the state of California, a minor needs a legal guardian. My Aunt Sarah applied, but the court said no. My biological father had priority. Thomas Thompson, 42, employed, married, with a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. So, I packed 2 suitcases and moved in with a man I'd barely spoken to in 7 years. The house was already full. Thomas and Patricia had the master. Lisa, Patricia's daughter, 15, had the 2nd bedroom. Jake, Patricia's son, 13, had the 3rd. My room was the converted storage space at the end of the hall. A camp cot, a folding table, and a bare bulb overhead. My suitcases didn't fit. I stacked them in the corner and sat on the cot, listening to Jake's video game bleeding through the wall. That first night, I heard Patricia in the kitchen. She wasn't talking to my father.
She was talking about me.
How long until the trust thing gets sorted? My father said something I couldn't hear. Then Patricia. She's been here 2 days and she already acts like she owns the place. I pulled my mother's blanket around my shoulders. I didn't cry. I just memorized the sentence. People tell you who they are early. You should believe them. 1 week in, dinner. Patricia made chicken casserole and served everyone before me. I didn't mention it. I ate what was left in the dish and washed my own plate. Halfway through the meal, Patricia started talking about money.
She didn't look at me.
She looked at my father. Lisa's first-choice school costs $50,000 a year. The roof's leaking again. The car needs a new transmission and my credit card bill. Don't even get me started. My father chewed slowly. Then he turned to me. His voice was careful, rehearsed. Your mom, she left you some money, right? We should probably talk about that as a family. I set my fork down. It's in a trust. I don't have access yet. Patricia leaned forward. Trusts can be changed. We looked it up. We. She said we. That meant this wasn't a dinner conversation. It was a coordinated ask. They'd been discussing it, maybe for days, maybe since before I moved in, maybe since the funeral. I picked up my plate, walked to the sink, rinsed it, dried it, and put it away. Ruby, my father said. We're talking to you. I heard you, I said. I just don't have anything else to say. I went to my room, sat on the cot, and opened the small wooden box I'd brought from Mom's house. Inside, her reading glasses, a birthday card she'd written me when I turned 14, and a folded piece of paper with a phone number. The name next to it in my mother's handwriting. M.S. Harrison, Esquire. I didn't call that night. I didn't know yet how bad things would get. But I ran my thumb over the ink and thought, Mom, what did you know that I don't? Turns out everything. 2 weeks later, I came downstairs for breakfast and found a stack of papers on the kitchen table. The top page was highlighted in yellow. The header read, Petition for Guardianship of a Minor's Estate, State of California. Patricia was pouring coffee. She didn't look up. I picked up the papers, read the first paragraph, and read it again. My father walked in, dressed for work. He saw me holding the petition and cleared his throat. It's just paperwork, he said. Standard stuff. If I'm your legal guardian, I should have a say in your finances. It's for your own good, Ruby. I stared at him. You want to control Mom's trust? I want to protect you. He grabbed his keys. You're 17. You don't understand how money works. Mom understood, I said. That's why she set it up. He left for work. Patricia sipped her coffee and smiled at me over the rim. It was the kind of smile that said, this is already decided. I went to the library after school. Not for my shift, for the back room where it's quiet and the Wi-Fi works. I sat in the corner and called the one person I hadn't been able to face since the funeral. Aunt Sarah picked up on the first ring. Honey, I've been waiting for this call. They're filing for guardianship of Mom's estate, I said. My voice cracked, the first time since the funeral. Sarah was quiet for 3 seconds then. Can you get to my place Saturday? Yes.
Good.
There's someone you need to meet. Her name is MS. Harrison, your mother's attorney. My chest loosened for the first time in weeks. My mother had whispered a name on her deathbed, and now that name was becoming real. MS. Harrison's office sat above a coffee shop on Main Street in the city. Small town, small building, small sign. But the woman behind the desk was anything but small. She was 55, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain, and she looked at me the way a person looks at someone they've been expecting for a long time. Sit down, Ruby. Your mother told me a great deal about you. Aunt Sarah sat beside me.
S.
Harrison opened a folder, thick, tabbed, organized. Your mother established an irrevocable trust 18 months before she passed. She named me as trustee. You are the sole beneficiary.
She paused.
Do you understand what irrevocable means? It can't be changed.
Correct.
Not by your father, not by his wife, not by any court petition for guardianship, because the trust already has a designated trustee, me. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. The trust held $400,000, $250,000 from Mom's life insurance, $95,000 from her savings, and $55,000 from the sale of our house. She'd sold the house 6 months before she died and moved us into a rental. At the time, I thought she was downsizing because of medical bills. Now I understood. She was building a wall. MS. Harrison reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. My mother's handwriting on the front. For Thomas. When the time comes. Your mother gave me this with specific instructions. MS. Harrison said. She asked that you deliver it to your father, but only when the moment is right. You'll know when. I held the envelope. It was warm, like it had been waiting. Your mother didn't hope for the best, Ruby. She planned for the worst, and she was right. I came home that evening and found my things in the garage. Not all of them, just the personal ones. The box of Mom's photographs, her favorite coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw out. My journal, the bracelet she wore every day for 18 years, a thin silver chain with a tiny locket. All of it stuffed into a black trash bag sitting on the concrete floor next to a bag of lawn clippings. Jake was in the living room playing his game. Patricia was folding laundry on the couch. I stood in the doorway holding the trash bag. Where's my stuff? Patricia didn't look up. We needed the space. Jake needs a gaming room. This is my mother's jewelry, her photos. And this is my house. You're living here rent-free. The least you can do is not take up space. I opened the bag, found the bracelet tangled in a scarf. The locket was open. Inside, a picture of me at age 3 sitting on Mom's lap. The photo was damp. Something had leaked on it. I closed the locket, put the bracelet on my wrist, and felt the clasp click into place. You can take my room, I said, and my voice was very steady.